Let's talk about some buy, sell, hold, and most importantly, avoid. You got a buy for us?
I do. I have a buy, and I got to watch him this past week when the Ravens played the Commanders, and I was reminded, oh my gosh, I need to go buy myself some Terry McLaurin right now. I wish I bought him last week, actually, before he scored 2 touchdowns against the Ravens. But I think now is the time to definitely go out and get Terry McLaurin before his value gets even higher. All right, we got Jaden Daniels here, whose value has already skyrocketed because he looks like one of the best rookie quarterbacks ever so far through 6 games. And Terry McLaurin, his wide receiver one, had 6 receptions for 53 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Ravens this past week. So far on the season, he has 29 receptions for 356 yards and 4 touchdowns, which puts him at wide receiver 12 on the season so far. I want Jaden Daniels wide receiver one. Remember last year when CJ Stroud came onto the NFL and just broke out and we're all excited about CJ Stroud? Well, it was pretty nice to have CJ Stroud's wide receiver one, Nico Collins, wasn't it, Mike?
Yeah.
You're sure happy if you have him this year. Well, I know Terry McLaurin's a little bit older than Nico Collins, but Terry McLaurin is there, and he's going to be there for a while. He is under contract. He did sign an extension. He's Jaden Daniels, wide receiver one. I want a piece of that. I want the next Nico Collins. Not that he's going to be exactly Nico Collins, but a rising quarterback and a wide receiver one. And look at the rest of the competition in this wide receiver room. They got rid of Jahan Dotson over the offseason. So they got Diami Brown as the wide receiver two there. Or Noah Brown, I believe, is there. So Terry McLaurin is the guy. He is the bona fide wide receiver one. And with how we've all seen Jaden Daniels playing, there's a lot of production and potential that is with being the wide receiver one for Jaden Daniels. So I love what I'm seeing so far. He already has some career high numbers just through the 6 games so far. Career high at the moment, average depth of target with 14.9. He's being used down the field. Jaden Daniels is a really, really good deep passer, a thrower down the field. And Terry McLaurin, with his speed and his ability to win at the catch point, has been able to really take advantage of that with that connection. He's also 10th in the NFL in first downs gained, once again showing that he gets down the field. He's not a screen merchant. We know that, even though the Commanders do run a lot of screens. He's also tied for second in the NFL with 4 touchdowns, only surpassing 5 touchdowns in a season once his rookie year, and he's on pace to break that. And then, Mike, when I was going through his stats, one last thing I want to say about Terry McLaurin. Over his career, he has seen 164 contested targets. Okay? A lot of bad quarterback play in that time.
Oh, yeah.
164 contested targets, not because he can't separate. Of those 164, he has caught 93 for a 56.7% catch rate of contested targets. When we talk about guys that change the 50-50 ball, a lot of times if they're catching 40% of the contested targets, that's a pretty good number. When you're actually over 50% and you're getting close to 60%, those guys make the difference. Terry McLaurin is one of those guys. He's the wide receiver one for Jaden Daniels, and I want him. And he's not that expensive because he's 29 years old, and apparently that means he's close to the deathbed. So I'm going to take advantage of that. And I'm going to go try to get him for a second and a third round pick because I don't think a second gets it done with his performance against the Ravens this past week. So you need a second and a third round pick. I'm not going to move a first round pick unless I have a bunch of them and I know that one's going to be late. Unless that's the thing that's taking me to the championship. I don't want to move a first round because he is still 29 years old. Also, would be looking to move a running back like Tony Pollard or Alvin Kamara to go get a guy like Terry McLaurin, or maybe a quarterback like Justin Fields. Though the news coming out today that Russell Wilson might throw a wrench in that.
Let's get into a sell, and I don't know if I'm full-scale panic on this guy, but I'm approaching it. It's Indianapolis Colts wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr. Nate, against the Tennessee Titans, 3 catches, 35 yards, and a touchdown. Playing through an injury. Now might be the time. If, he was kind of a sell candidate for a lot of people in the offseason, I feel. And I was like, I'm going to kind of roll with it and see what we got, hoping that Anthony Richardson was going to flourish a little bit more. That hasn't happened yet. Also worrying about him a little bit. On the season, 25 catches, 273 yards, 2 touchdowns. Not exactly where we thought we would be with him at this point in the year. So, he's hurt, and some major quarterback inconsistencies. Flacco comes in. He looked good. He only looked really okay this past week. But check this out. Aside from his 6-catch, 113 and no touchdown stat line in week 4, he has failed to go over 40 yards receiving in any game this season.
Ew.
That is not good. And consistency is key in fantasy football with the back injury and the quarterback question mark, the quarterback carousel they got going on there, I think it's time for me to cut ties. Here's some trades that I found courtesy of Fantasy Calc. If you're just looking for picks, I saw this one trade went through Pittman for a 25 second, 26 first, and 26 second.
It's a pretty good haul right there. I mean, I think
Yeah.
if you get a first, I think his value is probably a first, like a late first still. You shouldn't sell him for a second. I think he's got more potential than that, but I
Yeah.
think getting more than a first might be difficult.
Yeah. It's funny too, because you don't want to pay the first for McLaurin, but he's worth it. But you have to pay the first for Pittman, but he's not worth it. It's
Yeah.
just that's how player values go sometimes in fantasy football. Another one here, Josh Downs in a fourth for Pittman.
Yeah. I mean, I might at this point probably take Josh Downs over Pittman. So give me
Okay.
the fourth on top.
Okay, and one last one. Pittman in a 25 second for Kirk Cousins and Deontay Johnson. I put this one on here just for you, Nate.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. I'll take the Cousins Deontay side for sure.
I will too. I think, and you get Kirk Cousins on top of it.
Yeah.
Well, I should say you get Deontay Johnson on top of Kirk Cousins if that's how you want to think about it.
I do agree with you, Mike, to sell Michael Pittman Jr. because especially with the emergence of Josh Downs, which I know is exciting for all of us because we've all been Josh Downs stands over here. But the last two games for Josh Downs, 10 targets, 12 targets. You go back to week 4, 9 targets. I mean, this guy's the target hog, not Michael Pittman Jr.
Let's do a lightning round. How's that sound?
That sounds fun.
Go for
First guy, let's talk about Demario Douglas coming off 6 receptions for 92 yards and a touchdown against the Texans in Drake May's first start. Wide receiver 48 on the season with 24 catches, 245 yards, 1 touchdown. Drake May coming in now. Mike, what are we doing with Demario Douglas?
He's a hold for me. I bought him preseason like you told me to. I'm hanging on to him.
I am holding. I'm also buying like a late second
Okay.
is what I'm looking for because as much as I love Jalen Polk and I talked about him this offseason, the breakout has not happened yet. So, like I said originally in the offseason before I said Polk's going to be the guy, I originally said Demario Douglas, wide receiver 1 for this team. Look like it's going to hold up.
So far, so good. All right, I got one for you. Isaac Garendo. And if those of you who don't know who he is, it's Jordan Mason's backup in San Francisco. 10 carries, 99 yards, and no touchdowns with Jordan Mason out. Still 9.9 points right off the bench. He's the next man up in a Kyle Shanahan offense. I'm not saying it was seamless going from Christian McCaffrey to Jordan Mason to Isaac Garendo, but the way this scheme is, it is very running back friendly. They always seem to find guys that work really well in their system too. Nate, buying, selling, holding, avoiding.
I am selling
Okay.
because this is just another name in the Shanahan line of running backs that you can plug and play. Doesn't sound like Jordan Mason's going to miss much time. He's day to day. So it seems like we could see him just this week. So I don't expect him to miss much time. And then CMC might be back at some point. So I'm going to sell Isaac Rendo. I know that they was hyped though in the offseason because of the speed.
I'm going to sell as well. The only possibility of me holding is if I'm decimated by injuries across the board, or I got somebody who's coming up and I need to start him. If Jordan Mason doesn't play, then it's a hold.
I'm selling him for like a third, Mike. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, definitely that is going to be more than what you drafted him for. I don't
Yep.
know of any leagues that I'm in where he got drafted, or if he did, it was like a 5th-round pick.
Yeah, it was usually 5th, maybe 4th round when there was some hype around him with the
Yeah.
49ers. And that's what we talk about in the offseason. In the offseason, we're talking about these 4th and 5th round guys, and we're not saying, hey, this is the next Puka Nacua. We're saying you draft this guy, he gets an opportunity, you flip him for a third, you're doing good business. This is the opportunity here.
Yeah, remember, you're not drafting starters. You shouldn't be drafting starters in the 3rd round or later. Nate, what do you got for me next?
All right, we got the tight end 3 on the season, Mike. Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet. I had so much Cole Kmet 2 years ago, and I just checked my rosters this week, and I have like two shares left. I don't know what happened to all of them, but unfortunately, I do not have the tight end 3, who just put up 5 receptions for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Jaguars in London. Like I said, tight end 3 on the season with 26 receptions, 289 yards, and 3 touchdowns, averaging the same points per game as Trey McBride with 12.2. What are we doing with Cole Kmet, Mike?
Situation is good tight end play is really, really hard to find. So if I need a good one, I'm going to go ahead and buy Cole Kmet. I'm not going to try to overpay. If I'm starting with multiple seconds, because I like to try to stockpile those, I'd be okay with it. Obviously, you're probably going to have to do a late first or mid first in a tight end premium.
Yeah, you still might get away with a second plus. I might need 2 seconds, maybe a second and a third. We'll see.
Or if I can tear down somehow.
Yeah.
The funny thing too is Tucker Kraft is tight end 5 right now. Last I checked. That was yesterday I checked. Now
He
things
didn't
could
really do
change.
much this week, so
Yeah, but it's still just insane
yeah.
how
I
slow.
would say I'm holding on to Cole Kmet, but as I just said, I don't have much Cole Kmet to hold on to. So I'm gonna throw some seconds out there for Cole Kmet, see what conversations I can get started. I'm gonna buy.
Okay. Nate, Najee Harris finally had a good game this past week. He had 14 carries for 106 yards, a touchdown, 2 catches, 16 yards, no touchdowns. Still, not the biggest receiving threat guy. On the season, though, only 376 yards and that aforementioned touchdown. Buying, selling, holding, avoiding. What are you doing?
Well, I have a lot of Najee. I'm definitely holding on to him for right now. I know the production was a little hard to come by the beginning of the season, but this is the Arthur Smith offense, and we know that they want to run the ball. Not just Arthur Smith, but also Mike Tomlin, the Steelers in general. They want to play old traditional Steelers football. Najee Harris is that guy for them. I know he's a little hit or miss, but he looked really good this past week. Looked explosive. If we can see that Najee Harris, I'm going to be happy to have him in my starting lineup. So I'm going to hold him.
He's pretty much a hold for me too, unless I can move him for somebody a little bit more consistent. I think with James Cook being out this week, if I could possibly take Najee Harris and add a little bit to it to get James Cook, I think rest of season
Good
James
idea.
Cook's probably a better play. Or even right now, it's weird to say, maybe like a J.K. Dobbins. I believe Najee Harris is on the last year of his deal. It's one of those things we're swinging for the fences here. J.K. Dobbins playing some really good ball this year.
Yeah, I think JK might be a little volume dependent right now. He looked efficient the first week or two, but his efficiency has not been as good the past
In the
couple
Jim
weeks.
Harbaugh offense, he's going to get that volume though.
That's true. That's true. Hey, Kamani Vidal looked good though, so we'll have to keep an eye on that.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of running backs, Mike, here's another one. Kenneth Walker, coming off 14 rushes for 32 yards, but he did get the touchdown and then added 8 receptions for 37 yards against the 49ers for a pretty good week. On the season, RB11 with 51 rushes, 234 yards, and 5 touchdowns. What are we doing with the running back in Seattle?
It's easy to just say hold, but I'm going to say buy on Kenneth Walker too. He doesn't really necessarily light up the stat sheet, but like I had said about James Cook a few weeks ago, his combination of rushing and receiving work always makes him super relevant, and consistency has been hard to find this year. It seems like just across the board, everybody like died this weekend. I'm going to buy him. I don't think Zach Charbonnet is as big of a threat to him as people thought he was going to be
Nope.
originally. Second coaching staff now, they're still not really using him either. I'll buy him. Probably going to have to be a late first, or if you could find, tier up from like, I don't know, a Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones, something like that, add a little bit on top of it to get Kenneth Walker. I would do that as well.
I am probably holding and buying for it's hard to throw a first round for any kind of running back that isn't a stud running back, but I would look to maybe move a first for Kenneth Walker and get a little bit back on top if you can make that happen. I know he's the RB11, but I like what they're doing in Seattle. I think it's a good offense. I think they're going to come together and continue to score points.
Jameson Williams, Nate. What are you doing? This guy's killing me in my Sam Laporta shares. 3 catches, 76 yards, and a touchdown. 1 rush for 11 yards, and a 47-9 win versus the Dallas Cowboys.
I'm going to be selling JMO. I don't think the volume is consistent enough for him. I know he's a big play guy, and he seems to be making a big play just about every week right now. But I've never been huge on the low volume, big play guys. I think they're hard to count on a week-to-week basis. I want consistency in the players I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and move JMO, see what I can get for him, see if I can get a first-round pick for him, see if I can get a wide receiver that maybe I prefer to be a bit more consistent.
Yeah, I don't like the consistency either, which is why I'm going to avoid. I don't think I could buy him as cheap as I want to. I don't think I'm going to maximize value when I try to sell him. I don't have any shares to hold, and I don't know when to start him, even if I did. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and avoid Jameson Williams. You got another sell for us, I believe?
I do, and it's not the first time I'm selling this guy, Mike. So
Deja vu.
I am sorry to come back to the table here, but I need to sell Christian Watson. On a day where Jordan Love threw the ball 32 times, Christian Watson only saw 4 targets. And Romeo Doubs had 2 touchdowns. Jaden Reed looked good, had a touchdown. Now, Christian Watson also did have a touchdown. He had 3 receptions, 68 yards, and 1 touchdown against the Cardinals this past week. But on the season, 8 receptions, 148 yards, 2 touchdowns. Going back to the low volume, big play guys, Christian Watson certainly seems to be fitting that bill. Currently wide receiver 78 on the season. He has missed some time due to ankle injury. And we've had a thing with Christian Watson for years now with injuries. Now, this isn't his hamstring. It was an ankle injury this year, so maybe he has cured his hamstring issues. We'll see how that continues. But going back to the inconsistency, Mike, let's look at his weekly finishes so far this year. Week 1, wide receiver 39, and then 0 points despite playing the entire game that second week. Third week, wide receiver 52. Then he missed a week for injury, comes back wide receiver 20. I just don't like this type of player. Yeah. I like Christian Watson. It's nothing against him personally. I mention this probably every time I talk about him because I don't want to seem like a hater. I actually went to go see Christian Watson when he was in college playing for North Dakota State. I was so excited to go see him. I was pointing him out to my wife, like, that guy's going to be drafted one day, babe. And look, here he is doing great, but not on my fantasy teams. I'm not too interested in him. He's only wide receiver 53 on Keep Trade Cut, so the value is going to start to come back up coming off this performance. He'll probably finish the week somewhere in the 40s. So this does seem like another sell window for Christian Watson if we can make it happen. I would move him for a second-round pick. If I need a quarterback, I'd go after Geno Smith, Aaron Rodgers. Now that he's got Devontae Adams too, I mean, Aaron Rodgers has to put up some numbers the rest of the season. Or if you need a different wide receiver, Demario Douglas, like we talked about earlier, I think would be a great move. You might even be able to get something on top of Christian Watson, depending on who you're selling to. Or maybe a guy like Courtland Sutton. Mike, I know you usually like Courtland Sutton.
I do.
He's been productive for the Broncos. So, you might be, I think it might be hard to get something on top of Demario Douglas, but you might be able to get something on top of Courtland Sutton for Christian Watson. That's for sure.
People are down on Courtland Sutton. I think that is a lot of that is because of the fact that I'm going to segue here and tell you that I'm buying Bo Nix.
Ooh.
I think he's the reason that people are down on Courtland Sutton, but Courtland Sutton's been really making the best out of a not so great quarterback situation right now, although I do think Bo Nix is continuing to improve and continuing to get better. Look at his last game, Nate, 19 of 33, 216 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick, but he's really doing it with his legs too. 6 carries for 61 yards. That's an extra 6.1 points on top of a pretty decent stat line right there. On the season, Nate, he's completing 61.8% of his passes. Coaches love completion percentages over 60%. Anthony Richardson, right, hovering around 50%. By the way, he's 102 out of 165, 866 yards, still a little lopsided in the touchdown interception department, 3-4. He's only averaging 5.2 yards per attempt. Not great. It's going to get better. 31 carries, though, 119 yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns. Passing deficiencies, they're there. His rushing deficiencies, not existent. He is getting it done. It's some really, really nice throws against the Chargers this last week. And I think he could be a really good quarterback 3 down the stretch for you, or a potential quarterback 2 for your fantasy team. You're trading for him now. Here's some trades that I found. Mark Andrews, Nate, I got to do this to you every time I can, for Bo Nix and a 25 first.
Oh, man. I'm going to assume this is not tight end premium. It is super flex.
Correct.
I'll take Bo Nix in the first.
How'd that feel?
Like a lie. But the right thing to say.
Just so you know, I did fill the show sheet out 2 days ago. That was before Devontae Adams got traded, but I'm still sure this trade would still stand. Devontae Adams and a 25 second for Bo Nix and Chris Olave.
I like that side too. I like the Knicks, Chris Olave side. I think it's a good time to buy low on Olave. He's people are thinking that maybe Rashid Shaheed is better, and hey, maybe I'm thinking so. He's looked pretty good so far. But Chris Olave is stud no matter what. So
speaking of which, I thought Spencer Rattler, from what I saw of him, I thought
played pretty well.
He looked pretty good.
He did.
Like he
looked comfortable, which is not something you always say about someone in their first career start.
So he was 22 out of 40. Only 55% completion percentage, still over 50%. 1 touchdown and 2 picks, 243 yards.
And he played for a team that got behind early. He came back and then unfortunately did nothing in the second half. He looked good in the first half, but then struggled to get more later.
He didn't give up 52 points.
No, he did not.
And then one last one, a 26 first for Bo Nix and Wan'Dale Robinson.
This is going to be a little bit team dependent for me.
I think so too.
But I do get the value, in Superflex. You got to pay first for a starting quarterback, and Nix has looked good. I just wanted to point out, I brought up his stats for the year. It's currently quarterback 14, averaging 15.7 points per game, which is the same as Kirk Cousins, and averaging more points per game than Aaron Rodgers, Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, and Patrick Mahomes.
And the worst quarterback in the NFL, Deshaun Watson.
There's a lot of people averaging more points than Deshaun Watson.
You know who's not? Justin Herbert averaging 11.3 fantasy points per game.
You know who's averaging less than him?
Who?
Will Levis. I think the Will Levis experiment, I thought about investing a little bit into it this offseason, and I did not because I kind of felt in my heart that it didn't feel right, and I'm glad it did not.